In the quiet corners of history, beyond the grand narratives of kings and empires, there exists a story rarely told. It is whispered in fragments, scattered across dusty manuscripts, concealed within the shadows of forgotten archives, and hinted at in cryptic symbols that most historians dismiss as mere ornamentation. This is the story of a hidden bloodline, a lineage so clandestine that its influence has shaped the fates of nations, yet the world remains largely unaware of its existence. To understand the true currents of history, one must follow the invisible thread connecting the corridors of power, the secret alliances formed in whispered rooms, and the subtle, almost imperceptible forces guiding rulers from behind the throne. From the earliest kingdoms of Europe to the palaces of distant dynasties, kings have risen and fallen, their triumphs celebrated and their failures mourned. Yet behind every crown, there are unseen hands steering destinies, advisors whose names vanish from official records, and networks whose reach extends far beyond the limits of any single court. Among these hidden forces, historians, scholars, and conspiracy theorists alike hint at the existence of a bloodline that transcends ordinary inheritance, a lineage intertwined with prophecy, secrecy, and power that is passed down from generation to generation, always influencing, always observing, yet always hidden from the public eye. Legends speak of families who carried not only wealth and titles, but knowledge, wisdom, and influence far beyond what common records reveal. Some claim this bloodline traces its roots to ancient civilizations, perhaps even to times before recorded history, intertwining with the earliest myths, sacred texts, and cryptic prophecies. Others suggest that it may descend from obscure royal branches erased from the historical record, erased either by rivals or by the very guardians of secrecy who wish to keep their power concealed. Regardless of its origins, the influence of this lineage can be traced in the subtle manipulation of events, the quiet guidance of kings and queens, and the shaping of empires in ways that remain invisible to the casual observer. It is not a lineage marked by conquest alone, nor by the wealth it accumulated. Its legacy is far more insidious, and perhaps far more fascinating. The true power of this bloodline lies in its ability to remain unseen while orchestrating outcomes that appear natural, inevitable, or ordained by the gods themselves. Battles won and lost, alliances forged and broken, revolutions sparked or stifled. These may all carry the fingerprints of those who never appear in the chronicles of history. While ordinary rulers acted in the open, the members of this hidden bloodline operated in silence, influencing not with armies alone, but with knowledge, persuasion, and a deep understanding of human ambition and fear. Throughout history, there have always been clues, enigmatic symbols on royal seals, peculiar patterns in the succession of rulers, sudden shifts in power that defy logic. Some of these traces are dismissed as coincidence, others attributed to divine providence. But what if they were the marks of a deliberate design? What if the true story of history lies not in the visible battles, coronations, or decrees, but in the hidden hand guiding events from the shadows? This is a story that challenges the way we perceive power and legacy, forcing us to question the certainty of recorded history and the assumptions we make about who truly shaped the world. To uncover this bloodline is to enter a world of secrets carefully preserved over centuries, where knowledge is guarded as jealously as kingdoms themselves. It is a realm where the most influential figures may have been strangers in historical texts, their names obscured or forgotten, yet their impact is undeniable. They were the unseen strategists, the quiet manipulators of fate, whose guidance determined the rise and fall of rulers, the course of wars, and even the spread of ideas that define civilizations. Their story is not one of spectacle, but of subtlety, persistence, and an extraordinary understanding of the human condition. Tonight, as we embark on this journey, we will follow the hidden trail of this elusive bloodline. We will delve into forgotten manuscripts, explore the secrets embedded in heraldry and royal iconography, and trace the connections that hint at a legacy far older and far more powerful than most dare to imagine. We will explore not only the history of kings, but the invisible web of influence that may have steered them, shaping the destiny of nations with quiet precision. By the end of this journey, you may begin to see the world not as it appears in textbooks or history books, but as it may have truly been, a tapestry woven not only by the hands of kings and conquerors, but by a lineage that preferred to remain unseen, yet wielded power in ways that continue to echo through the centuries. The story of this hidden bloodline is not easily proven, nor is it entirely accepted by scholars. Yet the fragments we possess, the whispers carried through generations, and the inexplicable patterns in history compel us to investigate. It is a story of secrecy and revelation, of power concealed in plain sight, and of a legacy that may continue to influence the world in ways still unrecognized today. To follow this path is to peer behind the curtain of history itself and ask the unsettling question: how much of what we believe to be history is really just the surface of a deeper, hidden narrative? As the first shadows of this story unfold, we are invited to step quietly into a world where nothing is as it seems, where every crown may conceal a secret, and where the most profound influence often comes from those whose names are never spoken aloud. This is the whisper of the bloodline, the secret force that may have shaped kings, guided empires, and left an indelible mark on the course of human history, all while remaining hidden in the shadows, waiting for those brave enough to seek the truth. For every king who has ever sat upon a throne, there exists a network of shadows, advisors whose names rarely appear in history books, and unseen forces that guide the course of empires. History, as it is often written, celebrates the monarchs, their battles, and their triumphs, yet rarely accounts for the subtle currents that shape their decisions long before they are recorded in chronicles. Behind the grand halls and gilded courts, decisions were whispered in secret chambers, counsel offered in private, and influence exerted with quiet precision. The true rulers of the world, some historians argue, are not always those who wear crowns, but those who manipulate the crown from the shadows. These shadow figures often remained faceless in public records, appearing only as minor advisors, loyal friends, or obscure courtiers. Their power was not in commanding armies, nor in issuing decrees visible to the world, but in understanding the human psyche, in knowing what a ruler desires, fears, or needs to believe. A single suggestion in a private council could redirect the outcome of a war, shift an alliance, or alter a kingdom's future entirely. And when these subtle influences were successful, they were invisible, attributed to the wisdom or luck of the monarch, rather than to the guidance of the shadow behind the throne. Throughout history, these shadows have taken many forms. The cunning viziers of the East, the secret counselors of European courts, the advisors whose influence spanned generations. Some were scholars, others diplomats, and a few were members of lineages so obscure that their very existence seemed like myth. They worked tirelessly, often invisibly, to ensure that power remained aligned with long-term objectives, sometimes for the benefit of the kingdom, and sometimes for purposes unknown to anyone outside their circle. Yet across continents and eras, one pattern emerges. Those who truly shape history rarely do so openly, and the fingerprints of such figures are almost impossible to detect without careful investigation. It is within this web of influence that the hidden bloodline found fertile ground. By positioning themselves in proximity to rulers, these individuals could act as conduits for a lineage's power, subtly steering decisions and manipulating events to preserve or expand their family's influence. Their guidance could manifest in diplomacy, strategic marriages, military campaigns, or even seemingly random choices that, in hindsight, reveal a calculated purpose. While kings and queens were celebrated in public spectacles, the Bloodline's agents remained invisible architects of destiny, orchestrating events with patience and cunning across decades. Consider the famous cases of advisors whose wisdom shaped empires. In some instances, entire battles were won or lost because of counsel that history largely ignores. In other cases, rulers adopted policies that seemed inexplicable or contradictory until we examine the unseen forces pushing them in a particular direction. Behind every decisive moment, there exists the possibility of a silent hand nudging the outcome. The hidden bloodline was not always interested in ruling directly. Their influence was far more effective when it was subtle, imperceptible, and almost indistinguishable from fate itself. Even within a single court, the shadows were complex and layered. There were advisors loyal to the crown, but there were also those loyal to other interests, rival factions, secret societies, and occasionally, lineages that sought to ensure their own survival. Navigating these hidden networks required not only intelligence, but cunning, an understanding of the delicate balance between power, loyalty, and secrecy. Those who failed were often erased from records, their contributions forgotten or deliberately obscured. Those who succeeded left traces so faint that only careful examination can reveal their true impact on the world. The consequences of these hidden influences are profound. Wars that appear inevitable, revolutions that seem spontaneous, and alliances that look coincidental may all have been carefully engineered behind the scenes. Rulers themselves often unknowingly enacted the plans laid out by these advisors, their own ambitions harnessed to a hidden strategy. And it is precisely this combination of foresight, subtle manipulation, and long-term planning that makes the influence of the hidden bloodline so formidable. They understood that true power is less about visibility and more about control over the narrative itself. Even today, we can trace echoes of these shadows in the patterns of history. The rise and fall of dynasties, sudden shifts in political power, and the recurring appearance of particular families in positions of influence suggest that certain forces have guided events over centuries. By studying the intricacies of alliances, marriages, and advisory positions, a pattern emerges, one that points to a lineage whose members were consistently present in pivotal moments, shaping outcomes from the background. The kings, queens, and emperors we revere may have been the visible figures of history, but the hidden bloodline ensured that the currents beneath the surface flowed in their favor. This section of history, intentionally overlooked or dismissed as coincidence, reveals a truth both unsettling and fascinating. The most significant influences on human events are often invisible. Power is not solely the domain of those who command armies or build empires. It is equally, if not more so, the domain of those who operate quietly, who guide decisions, manipulate perceptions, and control the flow of information. The hidden bloodline excelled in this domain, mastering the art of influence over centuries, embedding themselves so deeply in the structures of power that their presence is felt even if it is never fully acknowledged. As we move deeper into this story, it becomes clear that the kings themselves were rarely the originators of the event's history records. Instead, they were instruments, their decisions shaped, nudged, and in some cases, orchestrated by forces beyond their comprehension. To understand the true history of power, one must learn to see beyond the crowns, the royal decrees, and the battles, and begin to perceive the shadows, those subtle, persistent forces that move in silence, directing the course of empires. In these shadows lies the first real hint of the hidden bloodline, a lineage that would go on to influence rulers, shape nations, and leave its indelible mark on history, even as the world remained largely unaware of its existence.
The origins of the hidden bloodline are shrouded in mystery, obscured by the mists of time and the deliberate erasure of records that might have revealed its true beginnings. Scholars and conspiracy theorists alike have long speculated about its roots, tracing the lineage to places and times where history blurs into legend. Some suggest it emerged from the ancient civilizations of Mesopotamia or Egypt, where the first dynasties understood the power not just of armies and wealth, but of knowledge, symbolism, and secrecy. In these early societies, bloodlines were considered sacred, often intertwined with religious authority and divine right, and the notion of a lineage with both spiritual and political influence was not only plausible but revered. In the shadows of history, there are whispers of families whose blood was considered extraordinary, endowed with wisdom or divine favor, though the exact nature of these claims is deliberately vague. These families often held positions of priesthood, counsel, or guidance for rulers, their influence quietly ensuring stability, prosperity, or expansion. Some legends even hint at ties to biblical figures or semi-mythical kings whose lineages were considered holy or uniquely powerful. These claims are, of course, difficult to verify, and yet the recurring references across different cultures suggest that something extraordinary may have existed, something deemed so powerful that its secrecy was paramount. By the time the great empires of Europe were rising, this hidden bloodline had allegedly begun to weave itself into the very fabric of royalty. Branches of the lineage are rumored to have married into early royal families, not merely for political alliances, but to consolidate influence, to ensure that their descendants would always occupy positions of power. While ordinary marriages between nobles were often public and strategic, those involving this bloodline were carefully concealed, celebrated only in cryptic records, obscure genealogies, and sometimes coded symbolism on coats of arms. The bloodline was always careful to remain behind the curtain, exerting power without drawing attention to itself, blending seamlessly into the tapestry of history while quietly guiding it. Across centuries, a pattern emerges. Those associated with this lineage often appear at pivotal moments in history, sometimes as advisors, sometimes as kings or queens in their own right, and sometimes as silent influencers whose presence is suggested only by subtle traces in texts or artifacts. Some historians have noted uncanny consistencies in the traits and decisions of rulers linked to these families. Their uncanny foresight, remarkable diplomacy, or sudden, almost unexplainable success. Were these coincidences, or evidence of a hidden genetic legacy designed to cultivate wisdom, strategy, and influence across generations? The notion may sound fantastical, yet the historical breadcrumbs are too persistent to ignore. In addition to political influence, there is reason to believe that the bloodline carried esoteric knowledge, secrets of philosophy, mathematics, astronomy, and perhaps even forms of mysticism or ritual that were carefully guarded and transmitted from parent to child. In an era when literacy was rare and knowledge itself could be dangerous, controlling and preserving specialized wisdom provided a form of power that few could rival. These hidden teachings may have allowed the bloodline to exert influence not through force alone, but through understanding, the ability to anticipate human behavior, manipulate events, and guide rulers with uncanny precision. Their counsel could change the trajectory of a kingdom, ensuring their enduring presence across centuries. Legends tell of families whose descendants were instructed from birth in the art of subtlety, diplomacy, and strategy. Children were educated not only in the sciences, literature, and languages, but also in the art of perception, learning to read human intent, to foresee outcomes, and to act invisibly. These skills would make them ideal candidates for guiding kings and queens without ever being recognized for the true extent of their power. While historical records often highlight military generals or celebrated politicians, it is possible that the real architects of history operated from the shadows, their knowledge and lineage quietly influencing outcomes across generations. In some traditions, the bloodline is said to have intertwined with sacred myths, carrying not just political but spiritual significance. Certain prophecies and ancient texts hint at individuals born to guide rulers, to preserve the balance of power, and to ensure that empires rise and fall according to a hidden order. These claims, while difficult to substantiate, suggest a lineage that was not merely noble by birth, but special by design, guardians of knowledge and influence, whose very existence was intended to remain concealed. Over time, these secretive families would embed themselves deeply into the political and religious structures of their respective societies, ensuring continuity and control even when kingdoms themselves fell into chaos.
Evidence of the bloodline's origins is fragmented, scattered across obscure chronicles, private letters, and coded genealogies. Some records suggest connections to lesser-known royal branches, mysteriously omitted from mainstream histories. Others hint at alliances between families across distant regions, united not by public diplomacy, but by a hidden agenda to maintain continuity, influence, and control. These connections often appear inconsequential at first glance. Yet when traced carefully, a web emerges, one that spans centuries, continents, and dynasties, revealing a lineage quietly interwoven with the fate of nations. The most fascinating aspect of the bloodline's origin is the deliberate secrecy. Every move, every marriage, every subtle influence was orchestrated to remain invisible to the outside world. Members of this lineage understood that overt power invites scrutiny, conflict, and potential downfall. Instead, they cultivated a network of influence, ensuring that their descendants would inherit both knowledge and strategic positions within society. Over centuries, this approach created a lineage capable of surviving revolutions, invasions, and political upheavals, while continuing to shape events in ways that appear almost uncanny to modern historians. As we trace this hidden lineage from ancient civilizations through the courts of medieval Europe, one thing becomes clear. The bloodline is not merely a family tree. It is a living network of strategy, knowledge, and subtle influence. Its origins may be lost to time, but its fingerprints remain in the course of human history. By examining these traces, we begin to see a narrative that challenges conventional understanding of power, revealing that kings and rulers, for all their glory, may have been guided by a hidden force, a lineage whose influence quietly sculpted the destiny of nations from the shadows. The story of the hidden bloodline's origins is thus both fascinating and unsettling. It suggests that the most significant currents of history are not always visible, that some legacies are deliberately concealed, and that power is often wielded not by those who appear in the spotlight, but by those who have mastered the art of operating unseen. To understand the bloodline is to glimpse the forces behind the thrones, to peer into the hidden chambers of history, and to recognize that the rise and fall of kings may not have been as inevitable as history records.
In the hidden corridors of history, there exist writings that few dare to study, manuscripts that were locked away, destroyed, or deliberately ignored by the mainstream chroniclers of time. These are the forbidden texts, the obscure prophecies and cryptic scrolls that hint at truths deemed too dangerous or too subversive to be widely known. Within their fragile pages lies the first tangible evidence of the hidden bloodline's influence, whispered across centuries in coded language and symbolic allegories. Some of these texts claim to reveal the destinies of rulers, the rise and fall of dynasties, and even the subtle guidance of invisible hands that shaped the course of nations. The most intriguing prophecies often appear in the unlikeliest of places. Ancient oracles, secluded monasteries, and secretive cabals recorded visions of a lineage that would guide kings from the shadows. Some prophecies describe rulers who would act under the influence of unseen mentors, making decisions that appeared divinely inspired yet were carefully orchestrated. These texts are rarely straightforward. Their language is poetic, allegorical, and sometimes intentionally misleading to ensure that only the initiated could interpret their meaning. For centuries, such knowledge was jealously guarded, passed from hand to hand in secrecy, and often suppressed by those who feared its implications. One of the most striking features of these prophecies is their consistency across cultures and eras. In Europe, cryptic writings allude to advisors who influence monarchs without ever claiming the throne themselves. In the East, scrolls describe secret families whose blood carries knowledge of statecraft and esoteric wisdom, ensuring that rulers act in accordance with an unseen plan. Even in distant civilizations, similar patterns emerge. Certain lineages are repeatedly identified as custodians of knowledge, capable of steering political, spiritual, and social outcomes. Such widespread recurrence raises the question, could these prophecies merely be coincidence, or do they point to a genuine, carefully concealed network influencing rulers across continents? Some of the forbidden texts go beyond mere prophecy, offering detailed guidance on strategy, governance, and manipulation of human behavior. These writings often contain instructions for cultivating influence, maintaining secrecy, and embedding one's family into positions of power over successive generations. Scholars who have studied these manuscripts note the sophistication and depth of their advice, suggesting an understanding of politics, psychology, and long-term planning that surpasses ordinary knowledge. It is as if these texts were designed not just to record events, but to create a blueprint for those who would guide history quietly from the shadows. The Bloodlines' connection to these texts is subtle but persistent. In many instances, the families associated with the lineage appear in the margins of the prophecies, or their symbols are encoded within diagrams and allegorical references. Some cryptographers and historians claim to have deciphered hidden genealogies, linking ancient prophecies to the rise of certain royal families. These discoveries suggest that the Bloodlines' influence was not random but guided by a deliberate understanding of fate, prediction, and control. In essence, the lineage seems to have internalized the wisdom of these texts, using it to navigate the ever-changing currents of politics and power. It is important to note that not all prophecies were intended to predict events. Many were designed to shape perception. By planting ambiguous predictions, the bloodline could influence rulers and public opinion alike, creating a sense of inevitability around certain actions or outcomes. This manipulation of belief is a hallmark of their strategy, ensuring that their guidance appeared almost divine or inevitable rather than the result of human influence. Over centuries, such methods allowed the lineage to cultivate trust, fear, and loyalty in ways that were subtle yet profoundly effective. Forbidden texts often carry warnings about those who seek too much knowledge, cautioning that the truths within are dangerous and could destabilize kingdoms if misused. This reflects the Bloodlines' understanding of human nature. Knowledge and power, if uncontrolled, could lead to chaos. By restricting access to these texts and guiding only selected rulers and advisors, the lineage ensured that its influence remained precise and controlled. This approach allowed them to survive centuries of upheaval, wars, and political intrigue, leaving traces of their hand in events while remaining hidden from the historical record. In some cases, the Bloodlines' fingerprints can be found in the cryptic prophecies that influenced major decisions. Kings and emperors, guided by advisors who understood these texts, made choices that seemed inspired or visionary but were in fact informed by generations of accumulated wisdom. Alliances were formed, wars were avoided or provoked, and dynasties preserved in ways that appear remarkable or even miraculous. The prophecies themselves often read like riddles, leaving room for interpretation while allowing the bloodline to manipulate events without detection. Even today, traces of these forbidden texts survive in obscure libraries, private collections, and encrypted manuscripts. Scholars occasionally uncover hints of genealogies, diagrams, or coded advice that suggest deliberate guidance behind seemingly spontaneous historical events. For those willing to look closely, these prophecies provide a tantalizing glimpse into the methods by which the hidden bloodline shaped the world, a combination of foresight, strategic insight, and an uncanny understanding of human nature. They are the roadmap of influence, the quiet whispers that guided kings and shaped empires long before the public record ever acknowledged them. To follow the trail of these prophecies is to enter a world where history and mysticism converge, where power is wielded through secrecy, and where knowledge itself is a form of control. The forbidden texts, far from being mere curiosities, are evidence of a lineage that understood the mechanics of influence long before modern scholars began to theorize about it. By studying these manuscripts, one begins to perceive the hidden patterns in history, the deliberate orchestration behind decisions, and the persistent presence of a bloodline whose purpose was to guide rulers, shape nations, and preserve a legacy that remains concealed to this day. As we journey further, these prophecies and forbidden texts serve as the first tangible bridge between legend and historical reality, between whispered tales and verifiable events. They hint at a lineage whose power was not just political but intellectual, spiritual, and strategic, a lineage capable of operating for centuries with near-invisible precision. By piecing together these clues, we begin to see a pattern emerge, one that points toward the bloodline's enduring influence and its quiet, calculated role in shaping the destiny of kings and empires alike. In the hidden corridors of history, there exist writings that few dare to study, manuscripts that were locked away, destroyed, or deliberately ignored by the mainstream chroniclers of time. These are the forbidden texts, the obscure prophecies and cryptic scrolls that hint at truths deemed too dangerous or too subversive to be widely known. Within their fragile pages lies the first tangible evidence of the hidden bloodline's influence, whispered across centuries in coded language and symbolic allegories. Some of these texts claim to reveal the destinies of rulers, the rise and fall of dynasties, and even the subtle guidance of invisible hands that shaped the course of nations. The most intriguing prophecies often appear in the unlikeliest of places. Ancient oracles, secluded monasteries, and secretive cabals recorded visions of a lineage that would guide kings from the shadows. Some prophecies describe rulers who would act under the influence of unseen mentors, making decisions that appeared divinely inspired yet were carefully orchestrated. These texts are rarely straightforward. Their language is poetic, allegorical, and sometimes intentionally misleading to ensure that only the initiated could interpret their meaning. For centuries, such knowledge was jealously guarded, passed from hand to hand in secrecy, and often suppressed by those who feared its implications. One of the most striking features of these prophecies is their consistency across cultures and eras. In Europe, cryptic writings allude to advisors who influence monarchs without ever claiming the throne themselves. In the East, scrolls describe secret families whose blood carries knowledge of statecraft and esoteric wisdom, ensuring that rulers act in accordance with an unseen plan. Even in distant civilizations, similar patterns emerge. Certain lineages are repeatedly identified as custodians of knowledge, capable of steering political, spiritual, and social outcomes. Such widespread recurrence raises the question, could these prophecies merely be coincidence, or do they point to a genuine, carefully concealed network influencing rulers across continents? Some of the forbidden texts go beyond mere prophecy, offering detailed guidance on strategy, governance, and manipulation of human behavior. These writings often contain instructions for cultivating influence, maintaining secrecy, and embedding one's family into positions of power over successive generations. Scholars who have studied these manuscripts note the sophistication and depth of their advice, suggesting an understanding of politics, psychology, and long-term planning that surpasses ordinary knowledge. It is as if these texts were designed not just to record events, but to create a blueprint for those who would guide history quietly from the shadows. The Bloodline's connection to these texts is subtle but persistent. In many instances, the families associated with the lineage appear in the margins of the prophecies, or their symbols are encoded within diagrams and allegorical references. Some cryptographers and historians claim to have deciphered hidden genealogies, linking ancient prophecies to the rise of certain royal families. These discoveries suggest that the Bloodline's influence was not random but guided by a deliberate understanding of fate, prediction, and control. In essence, the lineage seems to have internalized the wisdom of these texts, using it to navigate the ever-changing currents of politics and power. It is important to note that not all prophecies were intended to predict events. Many were designed to shape perception. By planting ambiguous predictions, the Bloodline could influence rulers and public opinion alike, creating a sense of inevitability around certain actions or outcomes. This manipulation of belief is a hallmark of their strategy, ensuring that their guidance appeared almost divine or inevitable rather than the result of human influence. Over centuries, such methods allowed the lineage to cultivate trust, fear, and loyalty in ways that were subtle yet profoundly effective. Forbidden texts often carry warnings about those who seek too much knowledge, cautioning that the truths within are dangerous and could destabilize kingdoms if misused. This reflects the Bloodline's understanding of human nature. Knowledge and power, if uncontrolled, could lead to chaos. By restricting access to these texts and guiding only selected rulers and advisors, the lineage ensured that its influence remained precise and controlled. This approach allowed them to survive centuries of upheaval, wars, and political intrigue, leaving traces of their hand in events while remaining hidden from the historical record. In some cases, the Bloodline's fingerprints can be found in the cryptic prophecies that influenced major decisions. Kings and emperors, guided by advisors who understood these texts, made choices that seemed inspired or visionary but were in fact informed by generations of accumulated wisdom. Alliances were formed, wars were avoided or provoked, and dynasties preserved in ways that appear remarkable or even miraculous. The prophecies themselves often read like riddles, leaving room for interpretation while allowing the bloodline to manipulate events without detection. Even today, traces of these forbidden texts survive in obscure libraries, private collections, and encrypted manuscripts. Scholars occasionally uncover hints of genealogies, diagrams, or coded advice that suggest deliberate guidance behind seemingly spontaneous historical events. For those willing to look closely, these prophecies provide a tantalizing glimpse into the methods by which the hidden bloodline shaped the world, a combination of foresight, strategic insight, and an uncanny understanding of human nature. They are the roadmap of influence, the quiet whispers that guided kings and shaped empires long before the public record ever acknowledged them. To follow the trail of these prophecies is to enter a world where history and mysticism converge, where power is wielded through secrecy, and where knowledge itself is a form of control. The forbidden texts, far from being mere curiosities, are evidence of a lineage that understood the mechanics of influence long before modern scholars began to theorize about it. By studying these manuscripts, one begins to perceive the hidden patterns in history, the deliberate orchestration behind decisions, and the persistent presence of a bloodline whose purpose was to guide rulers, shape nations, and preserve a legacy that remains concealed to this day. As we journey further, these prophecies and forbidden texts serve as the first tangible bridge between legend and historical reality, between whispered tales and verifiable events. They hint at a lineage whose power was not just political but intellectual, spiritual, and strategic, a lineage capable of operating for centuries with near-invisible precision. By piecing together these clues, we begin to see a pattern emerge, one that points toward the bloodline's enduring influence and its quiet, calculated role in shaping the destiny of kings and empires alike.
Throughout history, kings have been celebrated for their wisdom, bravery, and vision, but rarely does the historical record acknowledge the advisors who shaped their decisions from the shadows. These veiled advisors were more than counselors. They were strategists, manipulators, and sometimes the invisible hands that guided the fate of entire kingdoms. They occupied a space that was neither fully political nor fully personal, acting as intermediaries between power and destiny. Their influence often went unrecognized, yet their fingerprints are evident in the subtle decisions, remarkable victories, and unexpected alliances that history records. Veiled advisors were masters of perception. They understood that true influence is rarely exerted through force or decree, but through suggestion, persuasion, and the careful orchestration of events. A single word at the right moment, a piece of advice that seemed incidental, or a carefully framed argument could determine the outcome of wars, treaties, and successions. In many cases, the king himself may have believed he was making independent choices. Yet these advisors had long anticipated every possible move, steering the monarch along a path carefully calculated to benefit the hidden bloodline. Historical examples abound of rulers whose seemingly extraordinary judgment may have been guided by unseen counselors. Consider kings who enacted policies that defied conventional logic yet yielded incredible results, or generals whose unexpected strategies turned the tide of battles. While popular narratives attribute these successes to innate genius or divine favor, a closer examination often reveals the influence of advisors whose work was invisible, deliberate, and persistent. These figures were often trained in diplomacy, philosophy, and statecraft from childhood, cultivated to understand not only politics but the psychology of power itself. In many cases, these advisors were members or affiliates of the hidden bloodline. Their placement within the court was not accidental. It was the result of careful planning over generations. By positioning themselves near rulers, they ensured that the bloodline could shape decisions without ever appearing to rule directly. Through marriages, appointments, and strategic alliances, they embedded themselves within the very fabric of the monarchy, creating an unbroken chain of influence that endured for centuries. Their work was subtle, often imperceptible, yet its consequences were profound. Every treaty signed, every war avoided, every dynasty strengthened may have been guided, in part by their unseen hand. Veiled advisors were not merely political tacticians. Many were deeply versed in esoteric knowledge, ancient texts, and forbidden prophecies. This gave them an unparalleled advantage in advising rulers who often had limited access to such wisdom. With insight into human nature, history, and the patterns of power, they could predict outcomes that appeared miraculous or improbable. Their ability to anticipate crises and manipulate outcomes created an aura of wisdom around the monarch, reinforcing the perception that kings possessed extraordinary judgment, when in fact they were often guided by the careful orchestration of these advisors. The dynamic between king and advisor was delicate. Trust had to be carefully maintained and influence exercised without overreach. Advisors could guide, suggest, and manipulate, but overt control risked exposure, rebellion, or the wrath of the crown. Their skill lay in the art of invisibility, ensuring that every decision they influenced appeared to originate from the ruler himself. In this way, the hidden bloodline maintained power not through direct conquest, but through subtle, persistent guidance, creating a legacy that endured quietly in the background of recorded history. These advisors also acted as intermediaries between the monarch and larger, more clandestine networks. They conveyed knowledge, directives, and insights from other members of the hidden bloodline, ensuring that each decision aligned with broader strategic objectives. In some cases, they managed access to critical information, controlling which events reached the king's attention and which were filtered or delayed. This allowed them to shape perception, manipulate priorities, and subtly steer policy without drawing suspicion. The effectiveness of this system depended on discretion, foresight, and an almost intuitive understanding of human behavior. History provides tantalizing examples of advisors whose work is partially documented, but whose full impact remains mysterious. Some chroniclers hint at shadowy figures whose counsel turned wars or preserved dynasties, yet the details are scant, as if deliberately obscured. In many cases, their achievements were attributed to luck, divine inspiration, or the genius of the monarch, rather than the meticulous planning of a veiled hand. Yet, patterns emerge across centuries, suggesting a persistent, almost orchestrated effort to shape rulers and empires from behind the curtain. The veiled advisor's role extended beyond politics and warfare into cultural and intellectual influence. By guiding rulers in patronage, religious policy, and education, they helped shape not only the state, but the values and ideologies that would define societies. Art, philosophy, and scholarship were subtly directed, ensuring that intellectual and cultural currents aligned with the objectives of the bloodline. Their influence was pervasive, yet almost entirely invisible to those outside the inner circle of power. It is also important to note that not all advisors were benevolent. Some operated with ruthless pragmatism, ensuring that the bloodline's survival and dominance remained paramount, even at the cost of morality, individual freedom, or justice. Their power was a delicate balance between guidance and manipulation, operating under the constant risk of exposure. Yet this risk was mitigated by centuries of refinement, as each generation of the bloodline and its advisors perfected the art of influence, embedding themselves deeper into the machinery of monarchy and governance. As we consider the lives of these veiled advisors, it becomes clear that the story of kings cannot be fully understood without acknowledging the unseen forces that guided them. The hidden bloodline used these figures as instruments, ensuring that their influence was persistent, calculated, and invisible. The victories, reforms, and expansions of empires were rarely the product of a single monarch's genius alone. They were often the result of generations of careful, deliberate manipulation by those who operated from the shadows, quietly shaping history while leaving only the faintest traces for posterity to uncover. By examining the relationship between rulers and their veiled advisors, we gain a glimpse into the extraordinary sophistication of the hidden bloodline strategy. It is a story of subtlety, patience, and enduring influence. A lineage that understood that true power does not always lie in the crown, but in the wisdom, secrecy, and skill of those who guide it from the shadows. And it is within this delicate dance of kings and advisors that the hidden bloodline left some of its most profound and lasting marks on the world, shaping history in ways both visible and invisible, both celebrated and concealed. In the grand halls of palaces across Europe and beyond, marriages were rarely matters of the heart. They were calculated instruments of strategy, designed to consolidate power, forge alliances, and, in some cases, protect the interests of a lineage whose influence extended far beyond the throne. Among the most intriguing of these arrangements are those linked to the hidden bloodline, where unions were carefully orchestrated not merely for political expediency, but to maintain and expand a subtle, almost invisible web of influence. Each marriage, each alliance, was a deliberate move on a centuries-old chessboard, connecting families and dynasties in ways that would shape the fate of nations. These alliances were often shrouded in secrecy. While official records might describe a marriage as a diplomatic convenience or a union of convenience between noble families, whispers in private letters, diaries, and obscure chronicles reveal a far more intricate design. Members of the hidden bloodline strategically position themselves at the center of these unions, ensuring that their descendants would occupy key positions of power. By weaving themselves into multiple royal households, they created a network of influence that was simultaneously pervasive and largely invisible. Across generations, these connections enabled the bloodline to exercise subtle control over political decisions, military strategies, and even cultural movements. It is not difficult to see the logic behind such alliances. In an era where kingdoms constantly competed for territory, resources, and prestige, securing a marriage with the right family could mean the difference between survival and annihilation. But for the hidden bloodline, these marriages were more than pragmatic. They were deliberate acts of legacy building, ensuring that their influence persisted even as dynasties rose and fell. The selection of partners was meticulous. Loyalty, temperament, intelligence, and even compatibility with long-term strategic goals were carefully considered. The bloodline understood that the crown alone could not guarantee enduring power. It was the interweaving of families, the quiet consolidation of influence through blood, that ensured continuity across centuries. Some of these alliances were almost legendary in their subtlety. In certain cases, a seemingly minor marriage would unite branches of the bloodline across distant regions, creating a link that would later manifest in political decisions or unexpected alliances. Others involved marriages that produced heirs with the genetic and intellectual traits deemed essential for guiding rulers and empires. These children were often educated in secrecy, trained in diplomacy, strategy, and even esoteric knowledge, ensuring that the lineage's influence would persist into the next generation. Every union was a calculated investment, a deliberate extension of the bloodline's invisible reach. The consequences of these marriages were profound. Entire kingdoms were shaped by alliances whose significance was not immediately apparent. Wars were avoided, treaties were strengthened, and rivalries diffused, often in ways that historians struggle to explain. In some instances, the merging of families allowed the bloodline to quietly control multiple thrones, giving them unprecedented leverage over the course of regional and even continental politics. While kings and queens were the public faces of power, it was these carefully orchestrated unions that ensured the bloodline remained at the center of influence, quietly steering history according to its long-term designs. Beyond politics, royal marriages also served as vessels for culture and ideology. Members of the bloodline used these unions to subtly influence the values, beliefs, and priorities of royal households. Religious affiliations, philosophical perspectives, and even artistic preferences could be aligned with the lineage's objectives, ensuring that the influence of the hidden bloodline extended beyond policy and into the very identity of a kingdom. These marriages were not merely contracts. They were instruments of cultural engineering, allowing the bloodline to shape societies in ways that were almost imperceptible to the general populace. Yet these alliances were not without risk. A poorly arranged marriage, or one that failed to produce heirs capable of carrying the bloodline's legacy, could disrupt carefully laid plans. Political intrigue, betrayal, and rival claims were constant threats. To mitigate these risks, the hidden bloodline employed layers of strategy, ensuring that multiple lines of influence were maintained, creating redundancies that would preserve their objectives even in the face of unforeseen circumstances. Their foresight and meticulous planning allowed them to survive centuries of upheaval, wars, and shifting political landscapes. The secrecy surrounding these unions also played a critical role in maintaining the bloodline's power. By obscuring the true significance of marriages, the lineage prevented rivals from understanding the full scope of their influence. Public records would emphasize the political or ceremonial aspects of a union, while the real implications remained hidden in private correspondences, coded heraldry, and discreet familial arrangements. This veil of secrecy ensured that the bloodline could operate without challenge, subtly extending its reach across multiple kingdoms while avoiding detection. In some remarkable cases, these alliances connected the bloodline to multiple influential families simultaneously, creating a network that transcended borders and cultures. By carefully aligning themselves with rulers of varying temperaments, military prowess, and political skill, the bloodline created a system of checks and balances that reinforced their overarching influence. Even as dynasties rose and fell, the lineage maintained a presence, guiding decisions, shaping allegiances, and preserving continuity in ways that appeared almost miraculous to those who only observed events superficially. Through centuries of such strategic marriages and secret alliances, the hidden bloodline transformed the simple act of union into a powerful tool of influence. What appears in history books as mere diplomacy, political convenience, or noble tradition may, in fact, be part of a deliberate and enduring strategy to shape the course of nations. By understanding the meticulous planning behind these unions, we begin to see the depth of the bloodline's foresight, the sophistication of their methods, and the enduring legacy of influence that quietly persists behind the pomp and ceremony of royalty. Ultimately, these marriages were never simply about love, inheritance, or prestige. They were the lifeblood of a lineage determined to shape history, a calculated mechanism for embedding influence across generations, and a subtle yet potent instrument for guiding rulers and nations. Every union, every alliance, was a thread in a vast tapestry of control, weaving together kingdoms, cultures, and centuries into a web of power that the world has only begun to perceive. Through these carefully orchestrated connections, the hidden bloodline ensured that even as kings came and went, their influence remained eternal, guiding the fate of nations from the shadows with a precision that few could ever recognize or understand. Throughout the pages of history, symbols have spoken in silence. They adorn royal seals, coat of arms, ancient manuscripts, and architectural marvels, often dismissed as mere decoration or tradition. Yet for those who know where to look, these symbols are more than ornamental. They're a language of secrecy, a subtle communication channel used by the hidden bloodline to mark their influence, convey messages, and guide successors across generations. From intricate heraldry to mysterious geometric patterns, these symbols encode knowledge that the casual observer would never suspect, a hidden code woven into the visible fabric of power. Royal seals, for instance, are rarely arbitrary. Lions, eagles, crowns, and crosses may appear to glorify a monarch's lineage, but beneath the surface lies a network of meanings, associations, and connections. The hidden bloodline is thought to have embedded their own markers into these symbols, creating a silent signature that only those initiated into their knowledge could decode. In some cases, the presence of a subtle emblem or motif indicates allegiance, ancestry, or the passing of authority from one member of the lineage to another. To the untrained eye, these are decorative flourishes. To the informed, they are an invisible map of influence, pointing to unseen hands that shaped history. Architecture, too, bears the fingerprints of this secret lineage. Castles, cathedrals, and palaces often incorporate symbols, alignments, and spatial designs that seem deliberate yet mysterious. Certain patterns recur in structures across continents, suggesting a shared knowledge or coded language. Concentric circles, hidden angles, and arcane motifs may all serve as visual signals, communicating lineage, allegiance, or instructions to those in the know. Even religious edifices are not exempt. Hidden symbols embedded in sacred architecture could indicate the bloodline's guidance in spiritual as well as temporal matters, intertwining faith and politics with subtle precision. Manuscripts and chronicles offer yet another layer of concealed communication. Marginalia, illuminations, and unusual word choices are often dismissed as artistic flourish or scribal whim. However, many historians and cryptographers have noted patterns suggesting intentionality. Some hidden bloodline symbols may serve as markers of legitimacy, proof of secret counsel, or indicators of prophetic fulfillment. Others encode warnings, advice, or instructions for future generations. Across centuries, these symbols create a silent dialogue, linking rulers, advisors, and members of the bloodline in a complex web of influence that few outside the inner circle could comprehend. Even coins and currency bear potential traces of hidden messages. Monarchs often minted coins with intricate designs, allegorical figures, or unusual inscriptions. While these may have served as propaganda or status symbols, some patterns hint at coded communication, connecting rulers and their advisors to the bloodline's broader network. Numismatic experts have occasionally observed recurring motifs that appear across distant regions and centuries, suggesting that these small, everyday objects carried more than monetary value. They were instruments of influence, carrying the lineage's subtle imprint into the hands of citizens and rulers alike. These symbols also serve as a form of legitimacy. The hidden bloodline understood the power of perception, and by embedding their insignia in objects, buildings, and manuscripts, they created a visual authority that transcended words. Even when rulers acted independently, these symbols reinforced the perception of continuity, wisdom, and divine favor. In this way, the bloodline could exert influence not through overt control, but through the silent, pervasive power of symbolism. Patterns and motifs became invisible threads linking centuries of governance, shaping perception in ways that appear natural or inevitable to those who encounter them. Interestingly, some symbols appear to be deliberately ambiguous, allowing interpretation across multiple layers of meaning. A motif on a cathedral could reference a royal lineage, a sacred prophecy, and a strategy for succession simultaneously. This layered communication ensured that the bloodline could maintain secrecy while guiding events, shaping perceptions, and reinforcing loyalty. Only those trained in their understanding or fortunate enough to decipher patterns over generations could fully grasp the messages encoded within these symbols. It is a testament to the sophistication of their methods, blending art, politics, and mysticism into a language of influence that transcends the limitations of time. Even today, traces of these symbols remain, often overlooked or misinterpreted by historians. Scholars occasionally uncover recurring motifs across disparate locations, suggesting connections between rulers and dynasties that were previously invisible. When examined in context, these symbols reveal a story of continuity, strategy, and influence, pointing toward the hidden bloodline's deliberate orchestration of events. They are visual echoes of centuries of planning, subtle interventions, and secret guidance, quietly marking the lineage's enduring presence throughout history. The use of hidden symbols also allowed the bloodline to communicate across generations without exposure. Unlike letters or manuscripts, which could be intercepted or destroyed, symbols embedded in architecture, heraldry, or coinage were permanent and public yet incomprehensible to outsiders. This method ensured continuity, allowing successors to recognize alliances, lineage, and strategic instructions without compromising secrecy. Over centuries, these subtle signals became a language of the unseen, creating a map of influence that endured even as empires rose and fell. In the grand tapestry of history, hidden symbols reveal the invisible architecture of power. They are evidence of a lineage that understood perception, secrecy, and the subtlety of influence. By embedding their presence into the very fabric of culture, governance, and daily life, the hidden bloodline ensured that their guidance would persist across generations. The true story of kings and kingdoms is not only written in chronicles and treaties, but inscribed in the symbols, patterns, and silent codes that remain hidden in plain sight, waiting for those who know how to look to uncover their meaning. Through these symbols, we begin to see the hidden bloodline's hand at work, not as overt rulers, but as invisible architects of destiny. Every emblem, every motif, and every deliberate pattern is a fragment of a larger design, a secret language that connects centuries of influence into a coherent story. By learning to recognize these signs, we can begin to map the unseen network of guidance, strategy, and power that quietly shaped history, revealing the enduring legacy of a lineage that has mastered the art of invisibility for centuries. History often celebrates kings and generals as the architects of battles and conquests. Yet a closer examination reveals a more intricate tapestry. Wars are rarely spontaneous. They are planned, influenced, and at times quietly guided by unseen forces. The hidden bloodline, operating through veiled advisors and clandestine networks, is thought to have subtly steered the course of conflicts, ensuring that the outcomes aligned with long-term strategic objectives rather than mere chance or brute force. These silent interventions could determine the survival of dynasties, the rise of empires, and the preservation of influence for centuries to come. From the battlefield to the council chambers, the bloodline's guidance manifested in numerous ways. Advisors would feed intelligence to kings, manipulate perceptions of enemy strength, and orchestrate alliances that shifted the balance of power. Strategic marriages and secret treaties could prevent wars or escalate tensions at precisely calculated moments. Even the placement of troops, the timing of campaigns, or the decisions of generals could be influenced by subtle counsel. To the public and often to the rulers themselves, these victories and defeats appeared as the product of skill, luck, or divine providence. But the hidden bloodline's fingerprints were quietly present, shaping outcomes from behind the scenes. Consider the cases where seemingly minor decisions determined the fate of entire nations. A king's choice to delay an invasion, a general's tactical hesitation, or an unexpected diplomatic concession might appear coincidental. Yet in the shadows, advisors connected to the bloodline often nudged these choices. These interventions were rarely obvious. Their success depended on subtlety, discretion, and an intimate understanding of human psychology. By guiding rulers without revealing their presence, the bloodline ensured that history would remember the victories as the monarch's own achievement, preserving their influence while remaining invisible. The bloodline's impact on wars was not always direct. Sometimes it worked through information control. Advisors could manipulate the flow of intelligence, ensuring that certain strategies reached the monarch while others were filtered, delayed, or obfuscated. False reports, selective warnings, and curated counsel allowed them to create a perception of inevitability, directing decisions in a manner that seemed natural to those making them. This orchestration of knowledge was as important as any army, turning perception itself into a weapon and shaping conflicts without ever raising a sword. In some instances, the hidden bloodline's influence extended to diplomacy long before armies met on the battlefield. Secret negotiations, back-channel communications, and covert alliances were orchestrated to prevent unfavorable outcomes or exploit opportunities. Wars were often avoided or triggered with remarkable precision, suggesting an underlying strategy that transcended the whims of individual rulers. The bloodline's ability to anticipate events and position itself advantageously speaks to a level of foresight and coordination that borders on the extraordinary. Even major historical conflicts bear traces of this hidden guidance. Scholars who examine the seemingly improbable successes or failures of certain campaigns notice patterns, strategic oversights, sudden reversals, or miraculous victories that hint at deliberate manipulation. The Bloodlines network of influence ensured that certain families, rulers, or regions maintained stability, while others were allowed to weaken, creating a balance of power that reinforced the lineage's long-term objectives. Wars, in this context, were not simply battles for territory, but carefully managed instruments of legacy and control. Interestingly, the hidden bloodline also leveraged wars to consolidate influence internally. Victorious rulers, guided by veiled advisors, would often reward loyal families, redistribute power, or install allies in key positions. Conversely, perceived failures could eliminate rivals, weaken opposing factions, or justify political restructuring. In this way, conflicts served a dual purpose, shaping the external world while carefully engineering the internal power landscape to benefit the lineage's enduring presence. Every battle, siege, and campaign was not just a military event, but a chess move in a centuries-long game of influence. The secrecy of this guidance was paramount. The bloodline understood that visible interference could provoke resistance or undermine legitimacy. Advisors operated with extreme discretion, influencing rulers subtly and indirectly. Their strategies were often long-term, spanning decades, with multiple contingencies in place to ensure continuity even if circumstances changed. By remaining in the shadows, the lineage maintained both flexibility and power, allowing events to unfold in a way that appeared natural while serving a calculated purpose. Religious, cultural, and symbolic elements were also used to shape wars subtly. Prophecies, rituals, and ceremonial acts could influence the morale, perception, and decisions of rulers and armies alike. By weaving these elements into the fabric of conflict, the hidden bloodline amplified its influence, guiding outcomes not only through strategy, but through belief. This integration of politics, warfare, and esoteric knowledge made their guidance both pervasive and virtually undetectable to those outside their inner circle. Through centuries, the hidden bloodline's manipulation of wars ensured that their influence remained intact even amid upheaval. Empires rose and fell, alliances shifted, and monarchs came and went, yet the lineage endured, quietly shaping events to preserve its legacy. By understanding this hidden dimension of history, we gain insight into a world where the visible heroes of war are only part of the story, and the true architects of victory and defeat remain concealed, guiding history with a precision that only the most perceptive observers can detect. Ultimately, wars shaped in silence reveal the extraordinary sophistication of the hidden bloodline. They demonstrate that true power often lies not in armies or crowns, but in the ability to guide events invisibly, manipulate perception, and orchestrate outcomes across generations. Through this careful, hidden influence, the lineage ensured that history unfolded according to a subtle plan, leaving traces of their presence in victories, defeats, and the shifting tides of empires. Proof that even the chaos of war could be quietly molded by invisible hands. Beyond the public decrees of kings and the open battles of empires lies a shadowed world of knowledge, carefully guarded and rarely discussed. Forbidden books, secret scrolls, and esoteric teachings hold truths that challenge conventional history, philosophy, and science. These are not merely curiosities or myths. They are the intellectual weapons of the hidden bloodline, passed down through generations to guide rulers, manipulate events, and maintain influence across centuries. Such knowledge allowed the lineage to operate not merely through politics, but through insight, strategy, and an almost prophetic understanding of human behavior. This forbidden knowledge often encompassed areas that mainstream society dismissed or feared. Astrology, sacred geometry, alchemy, and mystical philosophies were not only theoretical pursuits but tools of power. By understanding the cycles of nature, the alignment of the stars, or the symbolic meaning of rituals, Members of the bloodline could predict, manipulate, and control outcomes in ways invisible to ordinary rulers. The combination of intellectual mastery and practical application created a rare class of individuals whose influence was nearly omnipresent, yet entirely hidden. Esoteric texts were carefully guarded, often confined to secret libraries, monastic collections, or private family archives. Access was restricted to those deemed worthy, and education was conducted under strict supervision. Children of the bloodline were trained from birth in these disciplines, learning to see connections others could not perceive and to act with foresight that bordered on clairvoyance. In this way, forbidden knowledge became both inheritance and instrument, a power that could guide kingdoms without ever being openly acknowledged. Some of the most powerful esoteric secrets revolved around understanding human nature. The hidden bloodline mastered psychology long before it became a formal discipline. They could influence rulers by anticipating desires, fears, and motivations, subtly shaping decisions without revealing their presence. Advisors employed techniques that manipulated perception, created illusions of inevitability, and fostered loyalty or obedience. By combining intellectual mastery with subtle manipulation, the lineage ensured that rulers believed themselves in control while their actions served a broader, unseen strategy. The bloodline's access to forbidden knowledge also extended into religious and philosophical realms. Secret interpretations of sacred texts allowed them to influence the faith of rulers and populations alike. By controlling the narrative around divine will, morality, or prophecy, they guided decisions that might otherwise appear spontaneous or divinely ordained. This dual command over spiritual and temporal authority made the lineage extraordinarily powerful, capable of shaping culture, belief, and politics simultaneously, all while remaining in the shadows. Even artifacts played a crucial role in transmitting forbidden knowledge. Talismans, rings, manuscripts, and ceremonial objects often carried encoded instructions, symbols, or wisdom. To the casual observer, these items were decorative or ritualistic, but to those trained in the lineage's teachings, they served as tools, reminders, and instruments of influence. Generations were linked through these artifacts, creating continuity of knowledge and ensuring that the bloodline's guidance persisted even amidst the chaos of dynastic upheavals. One of the most fascinating aspects of forbidden knowledge is its adaptability. While many esoteric teachings remained constant in principle, their application evolved with circumstances. Advisors trained in these secrets could analyze each situation, adapting strategy to the specific personalities, threats, and opportunities present. This flexibility allowed the hidden bloodline to survive centuries of political instability, warfare, and societal transformation. They were not static. They were a living network, learning and adjusting with each passing generation, ensuring their influence remained relevant and powerful. The bloodline's secrecy was vital. Knowledge that is powerful in private can be dangerous in public. Forbidden texts were often encrypted, coded, or hidden in plain sight. Scholars who encountered fragments might dismiss them as allegory, metaphor, or myth. Even rulers themselves might be unaware of the full extent of the wisdom surrounding them, perceiving only guidance in moments of counsel. This deliberate opacity ensured that the knowledge could be wielded effectively while remaining secure, reinforcing the lineage's near-mystical aura and maintaining its control over historical outcomes. Over centuries, the combination of esoteric knowledge, secret education, and subtle influence allowed the hidden bloodline to become architects of destiny. They shaped not only battles and policies, but also ideas, cultures, and the very perception of power. While history records kings and emperors as the decisive actors, the hidden bloodline operated in parallel, quietly steering events, guiding rulers, and orchestrating outcomes through wisdom, foresight, and secrecy. Their influence is the invisible thread connecting seemingly unrelated events, the silent hand shaping history while leaving only tantalizing traces for those who look closely. Ultimately, The story of forbidden knowledge and esoteric secrets is a testament to the extraordinary sophistication of the hidden bloodline. Their power was not visible or coercive, but subtle, intellectual, and enduring. By mastering hidden truths, shaping perception, and guiding rulers through insight rather than force, they created a legacy of influence that has persisted across centuries. To understand the full reach of history, one must recognize the quiet, often invisible authority of those who wield knowledge as power and whose wisdom has shaped the world in ways we are only beginning to comprehend. Religion has long been a cornerstone of civilization, shaping societies, laws, and moral codes. Yet behind the visible institutions, rituals, and doctrines, the hidden bloodline is believed to have exercised a subtle but profound influence on spiritual life. Their role in religion was rarely overt. Instead, it operated through careful guidance, manipulation of doctrine, and the strategic placement of loyal figures within the hierarchy. By shaping faith, the lineage could influence not only rulers but entire populations, aligning belief systems with their long-term objectives while maintaining the appearance of divine order. One of the bloodline's primary strategies was embedding advisors and loyal families within religious institutions. Monasteries, churches, and temples were not just centers of faith. They were hubs of information, culture, and power. By ensuring that trusted individuals occupied key roles, the bloodline could subtly influence the interpretation of sacred texts, the direction of religious reforms, and even the outcome of theological debates. This indirect control allowed them to guide rulers who were devout or reliant on spiritual counsel, ensuring that decisions aligned with the lineage's objectives without requiring overt interference. Sacred texts themselves often contain traces of the bloodline's influence. Some passages, when carefully examined, reveal allegories, symbols, and coded messages that correspond to the lineage's teachings, prophecies, or strategic advice. These embedded codes were accessible only to those initiated into their knowledge, allowing the bloodline to transmit guidance across generations. In essence, religious scripture became both a moral compass and a strategic instrument, reinforcing the lineage's authority while maintaining a veil of divine legitimacy. Rituals and ceremonies also played a critical role. The bloodline understood that symbolism and ritualized behavior carry immense psychological and cultural power. By influencing religious practices, they could shape perception, instill obedience, and reinforce social hierarchies in ways that appeared natural to the faithful. Public displays of devotion, liturgical alignments, and even festival timing were sometimes orchestrated to reinforce the lineage's influence, creating a subtle but pervasive presence in the spiritual life of a nation. Furthermore, the hidden bloodline is believed to have cultivated esoteric branches of religion, mystical orders, secret sects, and hidden fraternities, where advanced knowledge, prophecy, and ritual were preserved. These groups often operated in secrecy, passing wisdom from generation to generation and training select individuals in both spiritual and political arts. Such esoteric teachings provided members with the tools to guide rulers, influence society, and maintain the continuity of the bloodline's objectives without public scrutiny. The strategic role of religion also extended to kings and rulers themselves. Monarchs often relied on spiritual counsel to justify decisions, wage wars, or enact policies. Advisors linked to the hidden bloodline ensured that the guidance provided was not only spiritually compelling but aligned with broader strategic goals. This dual influence allowed rulers to act with apparent autonomy, while the bloodline subtly guided their choices, shaping empires and societies with an almost invisible hand. Throughout history, the bloodline's influence is visible in the rise of certain religious movements, the preservation of knowledge in monasteries, and the commissioning of sacred art and architecture. Cathedrals, temples, and shrines often incorporated hidden symbolism, numerology, and coded messages, reflecting the lineage's understanding of sacred geometry, cosmology, and esoteric philosophy. These creations were not merely aesthetic. They were vessels of knowledge, instruction, and subtle influence, bridging the spiritual and temporal domains to ensure continuity and control. The bloodline also leveraged religious prophecy as a tool for influence. Predicted outcomes, messianic figures, or divine warnings were often interpreted or misinterpreted in ways that served their strategic objectives. By positioning themselves as intermediaries between divine will and human action, they could shape perception, guide policy, and maintain authority over rulers who feared the consequences of ignoring spiritual counsel. The careful manipulation of prophecy added yet another layer to their intricate web of power, merging faith and strategy into a seamless instrument of influence. Even in times of religious conflict, the hidden bloodline's subtle hand can be traced. Wars of faith, schisms, and theological disputes often unfolded in ways that preserved the lineage's long-term objectives. Advisors ensured that opposing factions were balanced, that destabilization occurred in controlled ways, and that key individuals remained aligned with the bloodline's network. Through careful orchestration, they could turn potential chaos into strategic advantage, shaping both the religious landscape and the broader political order. Ultimately, the hidden bloodline's role in religion and spirituality illustrates the depth and sophistication of their influence. By guiding doctrine, shaping ritual, embedding loyal figures in institutions, and preserving esoteric knowledge, they created a spiritual architecture that reinforced their temporal power. Faith became both shield and instrument, a medium through which they could maintain authority, influence rulers, and shape societies for centuries. Understanding this dimension of history reveals that the lineage's power was never merely political. It was deeply intertwined with the spiritual and cultural fabric of civilization, a hidden current guiding humanity with precision and foresight. Power has always been intertwined with wealth, but the hidden bloodline understood that true influence required more than titles, armies, or spiritual authority. It required control over the flow of money itself. Across centuries, they quietly shaped economies, manipulated trade, and cultivated secret sources of wealth that were often invisible to the public eye. These hidden fortunes allowed the lineage to fund alliances, wars, religious institutions, and clandestine operations, ensuring that their influence remained unbroken even amidst political upheavals and dynastic collapses. The bloodline's financial networks were sophisticated, spanning regions, kingdoms, and continents. They often operated through intermediaries, loyal merchants, bankers, and advisors who managed resources with precision and discretion. By maintaining secrecy, the lineage could transfer wealth across borders, support allies, and invest in projects that reinforced their strategic objectives without attracting scrutiny. These hidden economies were not simply about amassing money. They were instruments of power, enabling the bloodline to act decisively and subtly at key historical junctures. Trade and commerce were essential tools in this network of influence. By controlling access to markets, critical resources, and supply chains, the hidden bloodline could shape political and economic outcomes. Kings, unaware of the full scope of their advisors' guidance, might favor certain policies or alliances that aligned perfectly with the lineage's long-term objectives. Strategic investments, monopolies, and economic interventions ensured that the bloodline retained leverage over rulers and states, subtly guiding the trajectory of nations without ever appearing to intervene directly. Secret banking and financial mechanisms played a critical role. Wealth was often concealed through trusts, foundations, and shell companies, long before modern financial systems existed. These structures allowed the bloodline to maintain control over assets while remaining invisible to historians, rulers, and rival factions. By moving resources discreetly, they could fund wars, rescue allied dynasties for financial collapse, or invest in technological and intellectual advancements that would benefit their lineage, all while preserving secrecy. The hidden bloodline's influence extended even to currency itself. Coins, taxation systems, and trade agreements could reflect subtle control, aligning economic incentives with strategic objectives. By influencing the flow of money, they shaped societies at every level, from the decisions of rulers to the lives of ordinary citizens. Economic leverage became a silent form of governance, allowing the lineage to assert control without force or visible authority. Even today, scholars note patterns of influence that suggest long-term manipulation of markets and resources, hinting at centuries of strategic economic planning. Wealth also enabled the bloodline to control information and education. By funding scholars, libraries, and secret schools, they could preserve knowledge, guide intellectual discourse, and shape the development of society in ways that aligned with their objectives. Economic power allowed them to protect forbidden texts, maintain secret archives, and ensure that the next generation of advisors received training in esoteric knowledge, diplomacy, and strategy. Money became the backbone of influence, silently underwriting the lineage's ability to guide history from the shadows. Beyond supporting direct influence, hidden wealth also served as insurance. In turbulent times, when kingdoms fell, wars erupted, or rulers acted unpredictably, the bloodline could deploy resources strategically to protect its members, allies, and interests. Fortunes could be used to stabilize dynasties, finance rebellions, or secure the loyalty of critical figures. This capacity to act decisively, even during crisis, reinforced the lineage's resilience and ensured its continuity over centuries, regardless of the instability surrounding it. The secrecy surrounding the lineage's wealth was as important as the wealth itself. Exposure could provoke jealousy, political backlash, or outright attempts to seize control. By operating through intermediaries, coded agreements, and hidden networks, the bloodline maintained discretion while ensuring their influence was felt across multiple arenas. Their control was invisible but pervasive, guiding rulers, markets, and societies in ways that appeared natural or coincidental to outsiders. Interestingly, hidden economies were not only a tool of survival or influence. They were a mechanism for shaping history. Economic pressure could provoke wars, incentivize alliances, or encourage reforms. By controlling the flow of resources, the bloodline could shape events before they unfolded, ensuring that historical outcomes aligned with their long-term vision. Kings, generals, and advisors acted under the impression of autonomy, yet their decisions were often framed by the subtle manipulation of wealth and economic opportunity. Ultimately, the hidden bloodline's mastery of economies and wealth demonstrates the sophistication of their strategy. Money was more than currency. It was a means of influence, a tool for secrecy, and a vehicle for continuity. By controlling resources invisibly, guiding trade, funding advisors, and shaping access to information, the lineage could direct the course of history without revealing its hand. Their hidden wealth ensured that the bloodline's power remained eternal, quiet yet formidable, a silent force behind the rise and fall of kings, empires, and civilizations.
History often celebrates inventors, scientists, and philosophers as solitary geniuses. Yet a hidden network of influence has quietly shaped the trajectory of human knowledge for centuries. The hidden bloodline, with a profound understanding of power, foresight, and strategy, recognized early on that controlling the flow of knowledge and innovation could be as powerful as commanding armies or amassing wealth. They understood that whoever influences science controls the tools that shape the future, and through these tools, the lineage could manipulate societies, guide rulers, and even redirect the course of civilizations, all while remaining invisible. The lineage's involvement in science was never straightforward or openly acknowledged. Their strategy operated in multiple dimensions, from direct patronage of scholars to the careful orchestration of intellectual networks. Wealth and influence allowed them to sponsor inventors, alchemists, astronomers, and philosophers, providing resources that were otherwise inaccessible. But these investments were far from neutral. Advisors and intermediaries ensured that research followed paths advantageous to the lineage's objectives. Whether it was the development of advanced navigation systems to facilitate exploration, innovations in weaponry to shift the balance of power, or medical breakthroughs to preserve key figures, the bloodline's hand guided progress with precision. Mentorship was one of their most subtle and effective tools. Members of the lineage, as well as trusted allies, often occupied roles as tutors, advisors, or patrons to leading thinkers. Through guidance that appeared innocuous, they influenced the direction of research, the framing of questions, and the interpretation of results. A mathematician might be encouraged to focus on principles that later inform navigation. An astronomer could be subtly guided toward discoveries that reinforce political power structures. Through these interventions, the bloodline ensured that innovation served strategic purposes, even when the public or the scholars themselves perceived it as independent genius. Secrecy was another cornerstone of their influence. Certain discoveries, techniques, or texts were deliberately withheld from public dissemination or confined to select circles. This forbidden knowledge spanned alchemy, early chemistry, astronomy, mechanics, and medicine, and was often encoded in manuscripts or communicated orally to trusted disciples. By controlling access to knowledge, the lineage maintained an informational edge, preserving both influence and strategic advantage. Even when knowledge became public, it often emerged in a controlled, timely manner, ensuring maximum impact and alignment with the bloodline's long-term objectives. The lineage also understood that influence over science extended beyond individual discoveries. It included shaping the interpretation and dissemination of knowledge itself. By controlling who published findings, how they were framed, and which innovations were promoted or suppressed, the hidden bloodline could subtly guide the trajectory of science. Innovations could be accelerated, delayed, or redirected depending on strategic need, ensuring that rulers and nations acted in alignment with their objectives. This manipulation of perception transformed science from a neutral pursuit into a tool of influence and foresight, where discovery and interpretation were meticulously orchestrated. Historical examples abound. The development of navigational tools during the age of exploration, for instance, not only expanded trade and knowledge, but also ensured that exploration favored regions and empires aligned with the bloodline. Military engineering, from fortifications to strategic weaponry, was often optimized through knowledge that appeared as innovation but was subtly guided to reinforce alliances or undermine rivals. Even medical advancements were often strategically applied to safeguard critical members of the lineage or key political figures, prolonging influence and stability across generations. Institutions of learning were another vital avenue of influence. Universities, academies, observatories, and research institutes frequently received patronage from the lineage or their affiliates. This support allowed them to shape curricula, direct research agendas, and cultivate intellectual environments aligned with their strategic vision. By influencing the education of future leaders, scientists, and innovators, the bloodline ensured that its philosophy and objectives were subtly transmitted, reinforcing continuity across generations. In essence, modern institutions mirrored the secret schools, libraries, and mentorships of the past, serving as centers of both knowledge and covert influence. The hidden bloodline's mastery of science extended into experimental methods as well. They were often pioneers in blending empirical observation with esoteric principles, integrating mystical knowledge, symbolism, and numerology into their studies. Alchemists, for instance, did not merely pursue chemical transformation. They encoded philosophical and strategic insights into their experiments. Astronomy and mathematics were not only tools for measurement, but instruments for navigation, prophecy, and power projection. By merging the empirical with the esoteric, the lineage created innovations that were both practical and profound, offering advantages invisible to those outside their inner circle. Innovation, moreover, was a tool of social and political control. The introduction of new technologies could reinforce hierarchies, shift economic power, and influence political structures. By controlling which inventions were adopted and when, the bloodline subtly shaped societies. Agricultural advancements, mechanical inventions, or navigational tools did not merely improve life. They realigned power structures, ensured dependency, and guided rulers toward decisions favorable to the lineage's overarching objectives. In this way, science became inseparable from strategy, a hidden lever guiding the flow of history. Even in the modern era, the lineage's influence persists. Technology, scientific research, and intellectual trends continue to be shaped subtly through funding, mentorship, and strategic guidance. Advances in medicine, energy, computing, and exploration often reflect long-term planning that aligns with the lineage's interests. Contemporary institutions, from think tanks to global research organizations, act as extensions of the same centuries-old networks of knowledge, preserving continuity while adapting to new contexts. The methods may have evolved, but the strategy remains the same: guide innovation to maintain influence and safeguard the Bloodline's legacy. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of the Bloodline's involvement in science is their long-term vision. While rulers and governments operate on short-term political horizons, the lineage plans in decades and centuries. Each scientific endeavor, each technological breakthrough, and each intellectual pursuit is evaluated not only for immediate utility, but for its potential to shape societies, preserve continuity,
and reinforce influence over the long arc of history. Their interventions, often invisible to contemporaries, have cumulative effects that become apparent only when viewed across generations, revealing a calculated orchestration of human progress. Ultimately, the Bloodline's influence on science and innovation underscores the depth and sophistication of their strategy. They demonstrate that power is not confined to armies, wealth, or political authority. It extends to the very tools that shape knowledge, perception, and civilization itself. By guiding discoveries, controlling access, shaping interpretation, and fostering loyalty among thinkers, the lineage ensured that the trajectory of human knowledge aligned with their objectives. Science, in their hands, became both a tool and a weapon, a vehicle for continuity and control, and a subtle means of shaping destiny. Understanding this hidden influence challenges the traditional narrative of history. The genius of inventors, the breakthroughs of scientists, and the progression of knowledge cannot be seen merely as isolated achievements. They are part of a complex, interconnected web of guidance, strategy, and foresight orchestrated by a lineage that mastered the art of influence across generations. The hidden Bloodline's legacy in science is not always visible, but it is undeniable, a testament to their ability to shape humanity not through overt power alone, but through knowledge, innovation, and the subtle orchestration of progress. In the end, the hidden Bloodline's role in science and innovation reveals a striking truth. History is rarely the product of chance or isolated genius. It is carefully guided by those who understand the interplay of knowledge, strategy, and foresight. Through the centuries, the lineage has ensured that innovation serves purpose, knowledge carries influence, and discovery aligns with long-term objectives. From the alchemists of the past to the cutting-edge research of today, the hidden Bloodline's invisible hand has shaped the tools, ideas, and inventions that define the world, proving that true power is as much about guiding minds as commanding armies, and as much about shaping the future as controlling the present. Throughout history, rulers and commoners alike have looked to prophecies and omens to interpret the future, hoping to anticipate crises, victories, and disasters. Yet behind many of these mystical forecasts lies the subtle guidance of the hidden Bloodline. For centuries, the lineage has been rumored to manipulate, interpret, and even craft prophecies, using them as tools to influence kings, shape public perception, and steer the course of events in ways that appear predestined or divinely ordained. Through careful orchestration, they transformed uncertainty into a strategic advantage, guiding history without ever stepping into the light. Prophecies were not merely spiritual curiosities, they were instruments of power. Monarchs who claimed divine sanction often relied on the counsel of seers, astrologers, and prophets, unaware that many of these advisors were linked, directly or indirectly, to the hidden Bloodline. By controlling the interpretation or even the creation of prophecies, the lineage could shape decisions, manipulate allegiances, and orchestrate outcomes that appeared miraculous. A foretold victory could embolden an army, a predicted famine could justify political reforms, and an ominous warning could discourage rebellion, all orchestrated with subtle precision. Omens, too, played a role in their influence. Natural phenomena, celestial alignments, or unusual occurrences were often framed and interpreted in ways that served strategic objectives. Advisors with connections to the Bloodline could present these events as meaningful signs, encouraging rulers to act or refrain from action, according to the lineage's plan. By embedding significance into what might otherwise be dismissed as coincidence, the bloodline exercised control over perception, turning randomness into an instrument of governance. One of the bloodline's most remarkable skills was timing. Prophecies and omens were delivered at critical moments, shaping decisions with maximum impact. Kings and generals might interpret guidance as divine or fated, unaware that the lineage had engineered circumstances to align with these messages. The perception of inevitability created obedience, loyalty, and alignment with long-term objectives, making the bloodline's influence appear as destiny itself. This mastery of timing ensured that outcomes were carefully guided without the need for visible intervention, allowing rulers to take credit for their actions while serving the lineage's strategy. The lineage's engagement with prophecy was also highly strategic in controlling public perception. By circulating predictions, either directly or through intermediaries, they could instill hope, fear, or compliance among populations. Wars, economic policies, and diplomatic actions could be framed as fulfillment of foretold events, reinforcing the authority of rulers aligned with the bloodline. In this way, the manipulation of belief became a potent tool, influencing not only elite decision-making, but the behavior and expectations of entire societies. Esoteric knowledge played a crucial role in these predictions. The hidden bloodline combined astrology, numerology, sacred texts, and mystical symbolism to forecast outcomes with remarkable accuracy. While many historians dismiss these methods as superstition, the lineage's systematic approach allowed them to anticipate patterns in politics, warfare, and societal behavior. They were able to convert spiritual or symbolic insights into practical foresight, giving them a predictive edge over kings, generals, and rival families alike. Interestingly, the bloodline often used ambiguity to their advantage. Prophecies were crafted in ways that allowed multiple interpretations, providing flexibility to guide events without risk of being proven wrong. A vague warning could apply to a range of situations, enabling strategic adjustments while maintaining credibility. This deliberate ambiguity allowed the lineage to maintain influence even when circumstances changed, ensuring that their guidance remained relevant across decades and even centuries. Artifacts and texts also served as instruments for prediction. Certain manuscripts, coded letters, and symbolic relics carried instructions, guidance, or warnings that only those trained in the lineage's methods could interpret. These materials allowed successive generations to continue the bloodline's strategic foresight, linking centuries of influence and enabling continuity in a world constantly in flux. Even as rulers and dynasties rose and fell, the knowledge embedded in these artifacts ensured that the bloodline remained an invisible architect of historical outcomes. The manipulation of prophecy extended to political rivals as well. By shaping the perceived meaning of omens and predictions, the lineage could undermine opponents, provoke hesitation, or create internal divisions. A rival king might be deterred by a forewarning, while allies could be emboldened by assurances of destiny. In this way, prophecy became a form of psychological warfare, allowing the hidden bloodline to influence not only events but the minds of those participating in them, guiding outcomes with a subtle but powerful hand. Ultimately, prophecies, omens, and predictions reveal the extraordinary sophistication of the hidden bloodline's influence. By blending esoteric wisdom, strategic foresight, and psychological insight, they transformed mystical guidance into practical power. Events that appear fated or miraculous were often carefully orchestrated, guided by a lineage that understood the profound impact of belief on human action. Through these methods, they shaped rulers, empires, and societies, demonstrating that the course of history is often quietly directed by those who master both knowledge and perception, leaving only enigmatic signs for future generations to decode. The hidden bloodline is not merely a relic of the past. Its influence stretches into the modern world, weaving through governments, corporations, and cultural institutions in ways that are rarely visible, yet deeply impactful. Centuries of accumulated wealth, knowledge, and strategic positioning have allowed the lineage to adapt, survive, and continue guiding events in an era dominated by technology, globalization, and mass communication. While kings and empires no longer rule with absolute authority, the bloodline's subtle orchestration persists, shaping the modern world through networks that few fully comprehend. One of the bloodline's primary strategies in the contemporary era is the consolidation of economic power. Modern finance, banking, and global trade provide avenues for influence far more sophisticated than the hidden economies of the past. By investing in key industries, guiding corporate decisions, and fostering strategic alliances, the lineage can shape markets, political outcomes, and even technological development. Multinational corporations, private banks, and think tanks often operate as instruments of influence, continuing centuries-old methods under the guise of legitimate business practices, philanthropy, or policy advisory. Politics, too, reflects the enduring impact of the hidden bloodline. While democratic processes may appear transparent, subtle guidance continues through networks of advisors, lobbyists, and consultants who align with the lineage's objectives. Policy decisions, international negotiations, and even election outcomes can be shaped by influence that is invisible to the public yet decisive in its effect. The bloodline's mastery of perception ensures that decisions appear organic or popular, while in reality, they are carefully orchestrated to maintain power, stability, and continuity of legacy. Education and knowledge remain critical tools. The lineage continues to fund elite institutions, scholarships, and research initiatives, cultivating new generations of thinkers, advisors, and innovators who are subtly guided in ways that serve long-term objectives. By shaping curricula, research agendas, and academic discourse, the hidden bloodline ensures that intellectual development supports its strategic goals. These modern methods echo their historical use of secret schools, libraries, and mentorships, preserving continuity and influence even in an age of unprecedented access to information. Media and culture have become new arenas for subtle guidance. Film, literature, journalism, and digital platforms allow the bloodline to influence perception, social narratives, and public consciousness. Through sponsorship, networks of loyal creatives, or the careful promotion of specific ideas, they can shape what society values, fears, or aspires to. This modern extension of influence mirrors their historical use of prophecy, symbols, and ritual to guide societies, except now it operates in the realm of ideas, information, and perception at a global scale. Technology provides unprecedented opportunity for both surveillance and guidance. The bloodline's understanding of human behavior, combined with access to vast data, allows subtle shaping of choices, trends, and decisions. Algorithms, social media influence, and data-driven campaigns can reinforce narratives, influence public sentiment, or subtly direct political and economic decisions. Modern tools amplify centuries of accumulated knowledge, providing the hidden bloodline with mechanisms that historical advisors could only dream of. The manipulation of perception, so critical in the past, now operates on a planetary scale. Philanthropy is another vehicle of influence. By funding cultural institutions, scientific research, and humanitarian projects, the lineage maintains a visible presence while shaping the trajectory of society in ways that align with its objectives. Even acts of generosity can carry strategic weight, steering education, innovation, and public perception while maintaining the appearance of altruism. This duality, visible benevolence paired with invisible strategy, ensures that influence persists without overt control or confrontation. The hidden bloodline also maintains continuity through symbolic and cultural influence. Traditions, ceremonial roles, and elite networks act as modern equivalents of the heraldry, rituals, and secret societies that guided rulers in previous centuries. Membership in certain organizations, access to cultural or religious institutions, and participation in elite networks allow the lineage to perpetuate its influence discreetly, guiding political, economic, and social developments across generations. These structures ensure that the bloodline's strategic vision remains active, even as the world evolves around it. Even contemporary crises, economic downturns, geopolitical tensions, or global pandemics offer opportunities for influence. The lineage's long-term perspective allows it to anticipate trends, mitigate threats, and position allies advantageously. By shaping responses, allocating resources, or guiding policy decisions, they can subtly dictate outcomes that appear chaotic or spontaneous, but are, in fact, carefully orchestrated. Their capacity to operate invisibly allows them to remain unchallenged, preserving both influence and secrecy. In essence, the modern legacy of the hidden bloodline is a testament to adaptability, foresight, and subtle mastery. While historical kings and empires may be celebrated in textbooks, the lineage's enduring influence is far more pervasive and sophisticated. By blending economics, politics, culture, and technology, they continue to shape societies in ways that are rarely visible, yet profoundly effective. They are the invisible architects of contemporary power, guiding decisions, preserving continuity, and ensuring that the centuries of accumulated knowledge, wealth, and strategy continue to exert influence in an increasingly complex world. Ultimately, the modern reach of the hidden bloodline demonstrates that history is not confined to the past. Their methods have evolved, but their objectives remain consistent: influence, continuity, and control. From finance and politics to culture and technology, they operate behind the scenes, shaping outcomes and perceptions while maintaining secrecy. Understanding this hidden layer of influence challenges our assumptions about power, authority, and history, revealing that even in a modern world dominated by transparency, the quiet hand of a centuries-old lineage continues to guide the course of human events. Art, architecture, and cultural expression have long been celebrated as the pinnacle of human creativity. Yet beneath the surface of every masterpiece lies a potential story of hidden influence. The hidden bloodline, with its centuries of subtle guidance and esoteric knowledge, understood that cultural works are more than aesthetic. They are instruments of legacy, communication, and control. Through the careful placement of symbols, patronage of artists, and orchestration of cultural trends, the lineage embedded its presence into the very fabric of society, leaving clues for those who know where to look, while the general public remains oblivious. From the grand cathedrals of Europe to the intricate tapestries adorning palaces, symbols were embedded deliberately. Sacred geometry, recurring motifs, and seemingly innocuous patterns conveyed messages of lineage, power, and spiritual alignment. To an untrained eye, these elements are mere decoration. To those within the hidden network, they are markers of influence, continuity, and covert communication. The bloodline used architecture as a silent language, encoding their presence and authority in structures that would endure for centuries, long after the rulers themselves had passed from memory. Artworks, too, became vessels of secret meaning. Paintings, sculptures, and manuscripts often contained subtle references, hidden portraits, symbolic objects, or allegorical compositions that spoke to lineage, esoteric knowledge, or strategic guidance. Renaissance masterpieces, for instance, are replete with symbolism that intertwines theology, philosophy, and hidden codes. The lineage understood that art could transmit ideas across generations, serving as both a cultural treasure and a strategic tool. By commissioning and influencing such works, they ensured that their presence and philosophy were woven into the collective consciousness, visible only to those who knew the code. Cultural patronage allowed the bloodline to guide not only the creation of art, but its interpretation and dissemination. Artists, architects, and scholars often relied on the lineage for resources, protection, and instruction. In exchange, these creators subtly incorporated symbols, allegories, and encoded knowledge into their work. The resulting pieces were dual in purpose, publicly admired for beauty or ingenuity, yet secretly carrying the lineage's influence. In this way, the bloodline used culture to communicate, inspire, and reinforce its authority, shaping societal values and perceptions in a manner that appeared organic. Architecture, particularly, provided a canvas for enduring messages. Palaces, castles, temples, and civic buildings were constructed with an eye towards symbolism, alignment, and secrecy. Certain structural patterns, hidden chambers, or design choices were not merely aesthetic. They encoded genealogical markers, philosophical principles, and esoteric knowledge. Cathedrals, with their labyrinthine floor plans, vaulted ceilings, and celestial alignments, serve both as spiritual centers and repositories of coded wisdom. Even public monuments or civic buildings, when examined carefully, reveal patterns consistent with hidden guidance, suggesting that the lineage's influence extended beyond royal courts into the public sphere. Literature and storytelling were also carefully curated tools. Manuscripts, poetry, and plays often contained allegories, parables, or coded messages that communicated lineage principles, philosophical teachings, or strategic advice. The hidden bloodline understood that narrative could shape perception, impart knowledge, and influence morality. By embedding meaning within stories, they ensured that the next generation could absorb lessons, guidance, and historical memory in a form that appeared natural, entertaining, or inspirational, while maintaining the secrecy of the underlying agenda. Music and performance, too, carried subtle influence. Compositions, ceremonial performances, and sacred chants could reinforce social hierarchies, align spiritual understanding, and communicate hidden principles. Musical symbolism, rhythmic patterns, and tonal sequences often mirrored philosophical and esoteric principles cherished by the lineage. By controlling patronage, teaching, and the dissemination of these cultural forms, the hidden bloodline ensured that their philosophy and influence persisted, often imperceptibly, across generations. Cultural influence was not only local but global. Through trade, diplomacy, and exploration, the lineage ensured that their symbols, philosophies, and aesthetic principles spread across regions, blending into local traditions while maintaining continuity. This diffusion created a subtle network of cultural cohesion that reinforced the lineage's authority, linking distant societies through shared motifs, ideas, and artistic expressions. Even when political control fluctuated, cultural influence provided a durable thread connecting generations, kingdoms, and continents under the lineage's quiet guidance. Interestingly, the hidden bloodline also used deliberate ambiguity in art and culture to protect its secrets. Symbols could carry multiple meanings, allegories could be interpreted differently by different audiences, and architectural patterns could encode layered knowledge. This ambiguity allowed the lineage to communicate selectively, ensure continuity across changing political and social landscapes, and maintain plausible deniability. Art and culture, therefore, were not merely decorative or entertaining. They were sophisticated instruments of influence, capable of surviving centuries of change while preserving the hidden bloodline's guidance and legacy. Even in the modern era, echoes of this influence are visible. Museums, galleries, and cultural institutions house works commissioned, curated, or influenced by descendants or affiliates of the hidden lineage. Patterns in artistic trends, architectural preferences, and cultural education often reflect subtle continuity of ideas and influence. The lineage's understanding of symbolism, perception, and social behavior allowed them to shape taste, values, and cultural memory, ensuring that their philosophy persisted even as societies modernized and democratized. Furthermore, by embedding secrets within culture, the bloodline achieved a form of immortality. Symbols, artworks, and architectural marvels endure long after political power wanes, preserving a narrative of influence and guidance for those capable of deciphering it. Each piece becomes a testament to the lineage's subtle mastery, a hidden record of wisdom, authority, and foresight. Through culture, the bloodline's philosophy, strategic insight, and presence transcend generations, embedding their legacy into the collective consciousness of humanity. Ultimately, the secrets in art, architecture, and culture reveal the extraordinary sophistication of the hidden bloodlines' influence. They demonstrate that power is not only exercised through armies, wealth, or political maneuvering, but through subtle, enduring expressions of human creativity and perception. By guiding aesthetic, structural, and cultural developments, the lineage left an indelible mark on civilization, one that communicates across time without ever revealing the architects. To understand history, influence, and legacy, one must recognize these cultural traces as deliberate, enduring, and profoundly strategic, the quiet fingerprints of a lineage that has mastered the art of shaping humanity through beauty, symbolism, and culture. Through these enduring works, the hidden bloodline ensures that its story continues to be told, even if only in whispers and hidden meanings, across centuries and civilizations, reminding us that true power often speaks in the language of symbols, art, and culture, far more eloquently than in words or wars. After centuries of shadows, secrecy, and subtle influence, the hidden bloodline's ultimate secrets emerge as a web of power, strategy, and knowledge that has quietly shaped human history. What was once fragmented, obscure prophecies, encoded symbols in art, esoteric texts, and whispered tales of advisors, now converges into a coherent understanding of a lineage whose influence spans generations, continents, and the very fabric of society itself. The grand reveal is not a simple story of kings or battles. It is a revelation of the methods, philosophy, and enduring presence of a force that has operated entirely behind the scenes, leaving humanity to act as if it were free while it was guided at every turn. At the core of the bloodline's power lies their unparalleled mastery of knowledge. Forbidden texts, secret archives, and esoteric teachings formed a cumulative intelligence that allowed the lineage to predict, influence, and shape events across centuries. Their understanding of human psychology, social behavior, and political strategy provided an almost preternatural ability to guide rulers and populations alike. Wars, treaties, reforms, and revolutions were subtly orchestrated, often appearing spontaneous, yet meticulously designed to serve long-term objectives. The bloodline's wisdom was both practical and philosophical, blending intellectual rigor with mystical insight, creating a toolkit of influence unmatched in history. Wealth and economic networks provided the means to exercise this power invisibly. From medieval trade routes to modern financial systems, the lineage maintained control over resources, ensuring that their strategies could be executed without interference. Hidden investments, trusts, and patronage systems allowed them to influence empires, governments, and industries alike. Economic leverage was not wielded for personal gain alone. It was a tool of stability, influence, and preservation. By controlling the flow of wealth, the bloodline ensured that critical decisions, from funding explorations to supporting political allies, could be implemented with precision and discretion. Religion and spirituality were equally essential to their strategy. By shaping doctrines, influencing sacred institutions, and guiding interpretations of prophecy, the bloodline merged divine authority with temporal power. Kings and rulers, often devout and reliant on spiritual counsel, unknowingly acted in accordance with a lineage's guidance. The careful orchestration of belief allowed them to steer populations, legitimize authority, and reinforce their long-term strategies. Even in the modern era, elements of this spiritual influence persist, manifesting subtly through cultural norms, ceremonial traditions, and societal values, ensuring that their authority endures in both tangible and intangible forms. The hidden bloodline's engagement with science, innovation, and culture underscores their sophisticated approach to shaping history. By funding key discoveries, guiding intellectual thought, and influencing technological progress, they ensured that advancements aligned with their objectives. Art, architecture, literature, and music served as enduring instruments of communication, embedding philosophical principles, genealogical markers, and esoteric wisdom into the cultural consciousness. These cultural artifacts, visible to the public yet coded for those initiated into their knowledge, form a subtle but enduring narrative of influence that transcends centuries and civilizations. Perhaps the most astonishing revelation is the Bloodlines' strategic use of perception. Throughout history, they have mastered the manipulation of belief, awareness, and understanding. Kings believed themselves autonomous. Generals acted under the illusion of chance, and populations perceived events as inevitable or divinely ordained. In reality, the lineage was always the architect, designing outcomes while preserving the illusion of spontaneity. This mastery of perception allowed them to operate without confrontation, maintaining secrecy while orchestrating events of profound significance. Prophecies, omens, and coded symbols played a critical role in this orchestration. The Bloodline understood that belief shapes behavior, and that perception can be as powerful as reality. By embedding predictions into public consciousness, guiding interpretations, and selectively revealing hidden knowledge, they shaped decisions, influenced events, and maintained credibility. Ambiguity was a deliberate tool, ensuring that even when circumstances changed, their guidance could remain relevant, adaptable, and unchallenged. History, seen through this lens, becomes less a chronicle of isolated events and more a tapestry subtly woven by those who understand the currents beneath the surface. Modern influence demonstrates the Bloodline's extraordinary adaptability. While empires have fallen and political systems have transformed, the lineage has evolved to operate in contemporary arenas: global finance, politics, technology, media, and culture. Their strategies have shifted from overt control to subtle orchestration, leveraging data, networks, and cultural influence to guide outcomes with unprecedented precision. Modern institutions, universities, corporations, think tanks, and international organizations serve as extensions of the lineage's strategy, preserving continuity and influence in ways that appear ordinary yet are deeply strategic. The hidden Bloodline's ultimate secret may lie in their long-term vision. Unlike rulers or leaders whose authority is fleeting, the lineage operates across generations, thinking in centuries rather than years. Their decisions are measured not by immediate gain, but by enduring impact. By blending knowledge, wealth, culture, religion, and perception, they have created a system of influence that is resilient, adaptive, and nearly invisible. The grand reveal is not merely the identification of a secret lineage. It is the recognition of a methodology, an enduring philosophy of guiding human events, shaping civilizations, and preserving continuity without ever revealing its architects. Artifacts, manuscripts, and cultural markers provide tangible evidence of this influence. Hidden chambers, coded symbols, and artistic motifs serve as both record and tool, preserving knowledge and strategy across generations. Each artifact, whether a painting, architectural design, or sacred text, contributes to a mosaic that, when pieced together, illustrates the lineage's extraordinary orchestration of history. Scholars who study these remnants glimpse the architecture of influence, discovering that what was once dismissed as coincidence, allegory, or superstition often conceals deliberate design. Ultimately, the grand reveal illuminates a hidden truth. History is never entirely what it seems. The rise and fall of empires, the triumphs of kings, the discoveries of geniuses, and the shaping of cultures are all part of a larger, invisible narrative. The hidden Bloodline has been the silent architect, guiding humanity through centuries of complexity, conflict, and transformation. Their power is subtle yet pervasive, invisible yet omnipresent, shaping outcomes in ways that appear natural, inevitable, or divinely inspired. In understanding this lineage, one begins to perceive the invisible threads connecting seemingly unrelated events, the hidden logic behind historical patterns, and the enduring influence of a family whose reach has never truly been broken. The grand reveal is not just the story of a secret bloodline. It is a revelation of the methods, principles, and continuity that have shaped the world itself. Knowledge, perception, and subtle orchestration form the ultimate tools of power, proving that influence is not always visible, and that the most enduring legacies are often written in shadows. The hidden bloodline's ultimate secrets also challenge our perception of authority, free will, and historical causality. By operating from behind the scenes, they demonstrate that power is as much about invisibility as visibility, as much about guiding perception as enforcing action. Their legacy reminds us that history, culture, and society are shaped not only by the visible actors, but by those who understand the interplay of knowledge, wealth, spirituality, and human behavior. Recognizing their influence is to understand the deeper currents that have guided civilizations, the quiet mastery of continuity, and the subtle architecture of destiny that persists across generations. The grand reveal leaves a profound truth in its wake. Power, when exercised with knowledge, foresight, and subtlety, transcends time. The hidden bloodline has endured because it mastered not the battlefield alone, nor the throne, nor wealth, nor art in isolation, but the synergy of all these forces. They became invisible, omnipresent, and timeless, guiding humanity's course while remaining undetected. Their ultimate secret is the demonstration that true influence is quiet, strategic, and enduring, and that the threads of history are often pulled not by the hands we see, but by those who remain in the shadows, shaping the world with precision, patience, and vision.